So it is a really windy day. Got airplanes flying overhead as well. We are back out here at Colonia Del Rey RV for part 2 of the video series on the things I look for whenever I'm looking at fifth wheels. Alright guys, so welcome back to my video series on things that I look for whenever I'm reviewing RVs. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to touch on a few areas that I missed when I made my first video on the exterior of fifth wheels. Now, when you look at this fifth wheel, one thing you might notice is the front cap. Now, the front caps of fifth wheels really come in two flavors. One is going to be an automotive style paint, and the other one's going to be a dyed gel coat. Paint is definitely the better way to go, even though there's still times that it can suffer from, you know, clear coat cracking and some other issues. For the most part though, it's going to last a lot longer than a dyed gel coat, and you're typically going to see a painted front cap on a slightly higher end version of a fifth wheel. In some cases, like on the Columbus back there, if you get the Compass series, it's going to have a dyed gel coat. If you get the standard Columbus series, it's going to have a painted front cap. And the painted front cap, again, is going to last longer, and it's not going to fade over time, or at least as quickly, and it's less susceptible to paint related issues. The next thing I look at, but I don't mention it a lot in videos, is the roof material. Typically on modern travel trailers, fifth wheels, and even some motorhomes, you're going to see one of two types of roof materials. It's either going to be TPO or it's going to be PVC. There are some other technologies that are kind of being phased out a little bit more, but you typically see either TPO or PVC. Now, either product is a really good product, specifically when it is adhered to a rigid substrate, to a backer board that prevents it from really moving or shifting. That's one of the reasons why a lot of manufacturers stick with TPO, because it is actually a really good product, and it's come so far even in the last 5 to 6 years in terms of the compound and the material they use. Got airplanes flying overhead, doing aerial maneuvers right now. And then finally on the exterior, we're going to look at the back end cap of your typical fifth wheel. So some things that I look for a receiver hitch. On the receiver hitch, I usually look to see if there's any type of a plug to connect a trailer. So if there's a four-way plug, there will usually be means for you to tow a small trailer or to hook something up behind that requires brake lights. So that's one of the things I look for on the receiver hitch. I also look to see if there's LED lighting. This unit clearly has LED lighting. And I look to see if it's wired for a backup camera. Now, wiring for a backup camera generally only means that there's wires behind that little plate up there that are connected to the rear clearance lights. Whenever you turn your clearance light on, it powers up your camera. But that is something I generally look for. Also, a full walk-on roof is something I look for. There are other things, of course, to look for. You can look for connections on the outside for a TV. You can look for speakers, things like that. But now we're going to continue on, and we're going to step inside of this fifth wheel so I can go over some of the things that I look for from an interior perspective, because there are quite a few things. First of all, I like to see at least what appears to be a quality material used on the couches. Now, I don't care if it's leather, if it's pleather, or if it's a cloth material. What I care about is if the couch appears to be comfortable and durable. Sometimes you look at the cushions and they're incredibly hard to press in. So even before I start filming, I'll go through and I'll kind of press on the cushions. I'll see what the quality appears to look like. And what you find is on your lower cost units, they tend to use a lower cost material or a material that's not quite as comfortable. So that's an area that I try to focus on a little bit. Coming up inside of the kitchen, I do look for solid facing cabinets. So basically the doors, the stiles, some of the other areas of the cabinet. Now I know in some cases some components of the cabinetry aren't going to be solid wood. They're going to use press board, they're going to use other materials, and that's pretty common even on some of your higher end units. But for the most part, the majority of what you are looking at from the front tends to be hardwoods, and that's nice, at least on some of the higher end units. I look for countertop space. Countertop space is very important to me because for me to see a lot of it means that they really meant for people to live in a unit or spend time in the unit, to be able to practically use a kitchen or use a space comfortably and have room for the things that they might bring with them. I look for drawers and cabinetry. Now, drawers are really important because in your home, drawers tend to be the area that you put all of your silverware, right? All of the things that you use the most go in drawers, and then your cups and plates tend to go in cabinets. So I look for that. I look for places that you can put pots and larger items. Basically, if you can put like an instant pot, or if you can put other type of cooking things, maybe a skillet inside of a storage area. That's all really important to me, so I try to focus on things like that as well. I look for seating. So that's one of the things that you probably notice in almost every video I make. I focus a lot on how many people could practically sit in a unit. So in this one, you have 2 people here, you can have 2 people down here, 2 people over there, and then 2 people over here. So you can seat up to 8 people in this living room area, possibly a few more if they're sitting in between or if they're smaller children. But I try to focus in on practically where can people sit and do they want to sit there. So, for instance, if you're sitting in this chair right here, you might not have great visibility to the TV. In the case of this unit, it seems like you'll be okay. Now, if you're sitting back here, that might not be an ideal spot at all because you really won't be able to see the TV very well. But you do have theater seats that pretty much point directly at the TV, which is really nice. If you're sitting here, you're also going to have that same visibility to look at the TV, which I can also appreciate. So a big focus of mine is having options, having the ability for you to move around and not be stuck in one area. What's the point of being able to seat 2 people there if nobody there is going to enjoy sitting there, right? So in a unit like this where you can seat 8 people comfortably inside of the living room and the kitchen, I may not want to sit there. I might want to sit here, or I might want to sit here. Having the flexibility of moving around is important, and I try to showcase that in videos because I think people want that option when they get an RV. They don't want to be stuck to one seating area because that's the only seating area that's been provided for them. So those are things I look for. Another thing I look for are some type of day-night roller blinds. If you are in an RV, what you'll notice really quickly is when it's super sunny outside, even with tinted windows, you get a lot of natural light. But there's certain times when you don't want that natural light. There's certain times when you want the unit to be darker. Perhaps if you're going to go out at night to go on some type of a nighttime hunt or excursion and you want to sleep in a little bit longer, so you want to be able to close your blinds and essentially black out your unit. Having that option is really nice, and knowing that manufacturers have the ability to put day-night roller shades into their units as standard equipment, I think is important. Now, the other thing that I also pay attention to is nighttime privacy. So typically, if you have shades, if they're not day-night roller shades, at night people can still see through them into your RV. So you have to have some way of covering up your windows for privacy. Having day-night roller shades gives you the ability at night to block your windows and prevent people from looking into your RV whenever you're camping at night, which I also think is pretty important. Privacy in an RV is something that I really think RV manufacturers should focus a lot on, as well as security. I would love to see an RV manufacturer that pre-wires the exterior, kind of like they do for the backup camera, but for security cameras. So you can buy either a wireless system simply means it's wired for power, but the signal itself is transmitted wirelessly, or a fully wired camera system into your RV so you can see what's going on around your RV at night. I think that would be spectacular if some manufacturer offered that. I focus on the refrigerator. The refrigerator is very important to me because sometimes you'll see a really small RV with a really huge refrigerator and it's not practical because there's no way you would stay in it long enough to really utilize something like that. I like these mid-size refrigerators because it's a good mix between something small and something large. Right in between gives you a residential refrigerator, but with a lot of storage options, but without taking up too much room. I also like full-size residential refrigerators when I see them in larger RVs. I don't like to see a really small refrigerator in a really large RV, and that's kind of what we had with our Coachman before. We had a really small 10 cubic foot gas electric refrigerator in a relatively large fifth wheel, and we filled it up really quickly. So that's something I like to generally see, a more practical size refrigerator in larger RVs. I also like to see more residential grade fixtures. Now, the reason why in a lot of RVs you're going to see plastic with kind of a metal finish to them fixtures is because they're trying to cut down on weight. They're trying to go with the lightest possible fixture that they can to reduce the amount of weight, because every little thing you add adds weight. And that's one of those things that RV manufacturers are always keenly aware of, and they're trying to reduce how much their units weigh. But I do like it when they use a stainless steel fixture, when there's stainless steel fixtures in the bathroom, stainless steel fixtures in other parts of the RV. Another area I typically look for is the air conditioning system. So you're going to see whisper quiet systems in a lot of your higher end units. Even some midline units you'll start to see it, but now you're going to start seeing a lot more air conditioners that don't appear to be whisper quiet, even though they are. because they're switching to a new Coleman version or a brand that's making an exposed unit whisper quiet, which is really cool. So that is something I focus my attention on. I always look for areas that you can also work. So if you're going to be living in an RV and you also have to work, it's always nice to have countertop space, things like that, that you can function and continue to work even if you're going to be in an RV. When it comes to windows, typically you're going to have two options. You'll have either a dual pane option or you'll have a single pane. Dual pane, even though, again, it's not as similar to a home-style dual pane as you might think, but it's essentially two panes of glass with an air gap in between. I know from an R-value perspective, they're not supposed to offer you much of an R-value improvement. However, when I have personally put my hand up against a dual pane RV window in the incredibly hot sun, I've compared it to mine. Mine is hot to the touch to where you can't even touch it. And the dual pane options, it's barely warm, which is really cool because that means that that air gap might be providing more insulation benefit than you might think. So dual pane, in my opinion, if you get it, or at least what I hear is if you get it, you're not going to want an RV without it, which is really cool. I focus on the electronics just not as much as some people might think. So in terms of TVs, in terms of the size, the way I kind of factor it in is if you have a 40-inch TV in a relatively small living space, it's big enough. They're putting these 55 and even 65-inch TVs in RVs. I don't know if it's as needed as it might be in a residential setting where your entertainment area is going to be so much further away from where you're going to be viewing it that having a larger TV really makes sense. But in the case of this unit, this is a 55-inch TV. I think it's more than adequate for, the spacing and the seating environment here. I know everyone's moving to these really wide fireplaces. I'm personally not a huge fan of them. I kind of prefer the standardized kind of squared look because it gives you storage on each side. You have all this space on each side here that would be great for cabinetry and things like that. But I do look out for things like that, as well as where you can store DVDs and other things that you might bring with you whenever you're camping, like a fire stick. Ceiling fans are always cool to see in an RV. I don't focus a lot of attention on them other than the fact that they look really nice, but they don't appear to be as functional as I'd like. I've seen a few that are reasonably functional, but none of them that compare to what you might see in a home. So coming into the bathroom area, I always focus on countertop space. This is one area that I like to practically think, can you use like you would want to use it? Can you put your toothpaste? Can you put your deodorants? Can you put your things on it without constantly being in fear of knocking it over and not having space? I look for a medicine cabinet. This specific unit doesn't appear to have one. And I look at the shower size. The way I like to kind of factor this in, is it big enough to use without being frustrated that you're using it? Get inside, move around, stretch out your elbows. A lot of them are getting this really nice residential or at least semi-residential size shower stall, and I think this is really appropriate for most RVs. I know some manufacturers go a little larger. I personally don't think you should go larger when it comes to your shower stall because the fact is, it's not something you spend a terrible amount of time in. And if you're going to spend a lot of time in it and you really want this huge space, then yeah, opt for a full residential length one, which would essentially be the rest of this area where the cabinetry is. For most people, I think having something like this, which is about 4.5 feet wide, is more than adequate because it gives you room for other things in your shower. I don't think you need to go any bigger than that. And I love to see a seat. I know some manufacturers put one that flips down. I'm personally not a big fan of flip-down models simply because it puts a lot of stress on the wall behind it. Coming into the bedroom, nice bedroom, king-size bed. I always try to see how much room is on each side, and if there's a queen option, how they do the end tables on the sides. I don't like end tables that protrude out over the side of the bed. I prefer something like this because you don't run the risk of rolling into it at night, hitting your head, jamming your arm into it, things like that. And if you don't have them, it usually gives you room for other things you might set on the side. In terms of valances, I'm not really picky on valances either because I think that that's definitely a personal thing, right? You might love this style of valance, you might like the wooden ones, you might like no valance and having a curtain instead. So I don't really point that out much. Now in terms of closet space, I do think this is important. You need to practically be able to have the room for the clothing you might bring with you in your RV. I like it when they put a hanging rod, of course, but this is plenty of space. I also like space that you can put a mop, a vacuum cleaner, broom, things that you might need to bring with you to take care of your RV, and oftentimes having a large enough closet can help you facilitate that. Now, in terms of a laundry area, I think this is also really important. A lot of people don't actually put a washer and dryer in theirs. I prefer to have the room for a stackable unit because it gives you this incredibly large area with a hanging rod, with the ability for you to do laundry if you're going to be out for an extended period of time, or if you simply want to have clean clothes when you come home and you don't want to have to do this big pile of laundry. So having a space for a laundry machine, stackable unit, is very important to me, as is having a space for a TV. Right, and a feasible space. I've seen some units that position a TV in the bedroom off on the side wall, so whenever you're laying here, you're kind of arched up looking at a TV here. I like it when they place it at the end of the bed, and I like it when they put it in kind of an elevated position as well, because that's more natural to how you might have your head on a pillow whenever you're watching TV from the bedroom area. Sidewall thickness is kind of important to me, but not really that important, because most fifth wheel manufacturers use relatively the same thickness of sidewall, anywhere between about 1.75 inches to 2 inches, and then you have your higher end units and a few kind of mid-high end units that use a 3-inch thick sidewall. That does come in handy in a colder environment, and it can block out some of the heat. But from a feasibility perspective, you're not going to find too many units with a 3-inch sidewall. One brand that does do it is going to be Open Range on a few of their units. On Riverstone units, which you can easily get for under $100,000, can have 3-inch sidewalls. DRVs, which are going to be well over $100,000, as well as Lux, will typically have 3-inch sidewalls. But it's not a huge focus of mine because I know the vast majority of units I walk through aren't going to have them. I do like tall slide heights. So this slide right here is about 6.5 feet tall, which means that you can stand under it without worrying about hitting your head, which I do appreciate. I appreciate manufacturers that kind of focus some attention in this area, as opposed to making the roof line so shallow that these slides come down so you have to duck under them. And, you know, having tall slide heights, I think, is important. From a flooring perspective, I focus in on what I think is going to be a more modern style flooring for the longest period of time. I really don't care about carpet on the sides here. I don't focus on that because the reason a lot of manufacturers still use carpet here as opposed to vinyl on the slides is because vinyl tends to show imperfections underneath it in a pretty extreme way. After you step on it for a period of time, if there's any type of gap or seam, you'll start to see it through the vinyl, whereas carpet conceals it a lot better. And that's one of the main reasons why the industry is stuck with putting carpet on slides. Even if they can make them flush, you run the risk that you're going to be imprinting on the vinyl if there's vinyl there, and carpet just conceals that a little bit better for a longer period of time, and that's one of the reasons why you see that. Overall, though, those are most of the things I look for. I look for it to be as practical as possible. I want the kitchen to be functional for a family and not just, you know, look pretty but not be functional. I look for a living room space that has a lot of seating, and I usually kind of consider the kitchen seating and the living room seating as one, since it gives you a lot of options of where you can sit. I look for the ability to block out and get privacy inside of your living room, kitchen area, and your bedroom. So I like day-night roller shades, things like that. I like quieter air conditioning, whether you have this traditional whisper quiet system with the 2 return ducts there, or you have the newer whisper quiet system that doesn't require that. I like really nice fixtures and lighting and things like that, as long as it's functional. And I like a bedroom that gives you plenty of space to get onto the bed, around the bed, plenty of room in the closet, plenty of room for a washer and dryer, nice tall slide heights as well. And I like a bathroom that gives you plenty of practical space to take a shower. You don't have to worry about bumping into everything, but at the same time doesn't take up so much room that you eliminate things that also might be important, just so you have a really pretty shower. And of course, countertop space, and I like plenty of space in front of the toilet. That's one thing I missed earlier. A lot of space in front of the toilet, because for taller folks or shorter folks, it doesn't really matter as long as you have the ability to comfortably, use the restroom and not have to worry about being cramped in there. Leave a comment below. Tell me the things that you look for when you're walking through an RV, specifically large fifth wheels like this as well. I'd love to hear from you. Anyways, if you haven't had a chance, take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you again very soon.